Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a very special book haul video where I will be talking about my book haul for the month of February. Now, normally my book hauls, I didn't do them monthly before, I did them like quarterly, and then I was buying so many books that I was like, I have to do monthly. And then I thought, you know what? Let's count how many. So I had been doing upwards of 20 or more books per month in like November, December, and January. And I was like, this is just getting too crazy. So I tried to ease back a little bit in February, and thankfully I did. Not as much as I should have, but I did ease back a little bit. Also, I bought 15 books in February, and 3 of them are just different copies of what I already own and read. So it's really only 12 new books to me, which is that's about I'm replacing what I read in January. So that's a good average, just about. So why don't I get into them? I have 4 science fiction novels. I have 5 fantasy novels. I have a Star Trek novel. I have a Tom Clancy novel. I have 3 middle grade novels, and I have a young adult novel. So, without further ado, let's begin with my science fiction books that I got. The first one that I got was Monster Hunter International by Larry Correia. I've been trying to get more books from Baen Books. I've been trying to look into their authors, and this was one that came highly recommended. It was a science fiction-y book, and when I read the premise, I thought, I was like, ooh, that sounds really cheesy and fun, and it looks like it'll be an interesting series to read. And so that one is the first book I got in mass market. By the way, I also realized I am a mass market person because almost all the books I bought were mass market except for the middle grade stuff, which you physically cannot get in mass market. So anyway, next for science fiction, I bought 3 Ben Bova novels. I've never read Ben Bova before, but I've seen his name in the publisher's sphere. I know he died recently, but he was one of those authors that everyone in science fiction referenced at some point. And so I got his book Mars, his book Return to Mars, and his book Saturn, which apparently are all part of his big Guide to the Universe series. I'm still trying to navigate that. I've watched a few videos, but I'm still a little unclear. I have not read clear things that say you have to start here. You have to start here. I've seen people been like, yeah, you can jump around as long as an individual series of planets stays together. So I got the Mars one because I am really intrigued by the concept of characters settling a planet for the first time and building a settlement from the ground up. That concept really fascinates me. It's what I thought I was going to be getting with Artemis, Andy Weir's book. That's not what that book was about, kind of sadly. But that kind of book idea was really fascinating to me. And so I saw this, and I don't know if this is entirely that, but that seemed to be an element of the premise. And so I really liked that concept, and so I wanted to read it. And also I thought this was, even though mine is a tattered copy, that's a beautiful cover, I think. I think it's gorgeous. So I got this one with that kind of building something from the ground up, kind of like, what's that TV show? For All Mankind, which I think is just a brilliant concept of a TV show. I also got the sequel, Return to Mars, because I was like, hey, it's the same kind of series kind of pitch. And then the reason I got Saturn was, of all the actual pitches for the books, when I read the pitches on the back, this pitch I thought was the best of the pitches, and it seems kind of standalone. I think what I saw was there's one sequel book, but it seemed fairly standalone. Really, all these appear to be like he didn't write them necessarily with the big interconnected plan like someone like Brandon Sanderson would. But anyway, I like these kind of ideas. I do not like that they're all published by different publishers. I feel like that's kind of frustrating. Like, stick with a publisher. I understand occasionally a publisher will be like, we don't want to publish you anymore, but this is crazy. So the first one is from Bantam Books, which is a good publisher. The other one is from EOS Science Fiction, which I believe is an older one that I haven't really encountered much. And then the third one is from Tor. So those are my science fiction books that I purchased, and I am looking forward to getting to those eventually. Science fiction has taken up a significantly more amount of my time than I expected. I thought this year would be my return to fantasy, and it really so far has been my return to sci-fi, like my real delve into sci-fi. I dipped my toes in 2022, really started getting more into sci-fi, and now I feel like the floodgates are opening. Now I'm going to talk about my some of my standalones that I bought. I got a Greg Cox book called The Rings of Time. It is a Star Trek novel. It is a standalone Star Trek, the original series novel. And what I'm really excited about with this book is Greg Cox wrote some fantastic books. Child of Two Worlds that I read recently, phenomenal book. The Antares Maelstrom, amazing top-tier Star Trek for me. And then also he wrote the novel, the Star Trek Legacy's first book, Captain to Captain, which was just a riveting book. And so he's like 3 for 3 for me with writing banger books. So I'm really excited to read this one. It apparently takes place in like the time of the Enterprise, but also takes place in 2020, even though this book was written, 20 years ago, but it takes place in 2020, and I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting concept. So I'm excited about this Star Trek book. It's the only Star Trek book I bought this month. Except for the new one that's coming out, it's the only Star Trek book I bought this month, which makes me very happy because I could have bought a lot more. Next, I have a Tom Clancy novel, Clear and Present Danger. I was looking through my Goodreads and looking through my my records, and I was like, it's been like 2 years, more than 2 years now, since I read a Tom Clancy book. And that is a shame. And I think that's because I read Hunt for October, which was a hard read, but it was so rewarding because it's such a great book. And then I read Cardinal of the Kremlin, which I just didn't love. And so I just put aside this, and also because of how thick and big the books were, I was like, I'm not even sure I really want to put myself through that. If I'm going to read a big fat book, I'm going to read a fantasy novel. I finally just decided, you know what? I'm going to try to get back into Tom Clancy sometime in 2023. Don't know when, don't know exactly how, but eventually. And I thought Clear and Present Danger is a next good jumping in point. And my dad's read Clear and Present Danger, and when I asked him about it, he didn't have that many memories, which does not bode well for it. And he's read a lot of Tom Clancy. Next, why don't I go into my fantasy books? I wrote 5 fantasy books. I'm going to save that one for a second. So first I bought Soul of the Fire. I bought this while I was reading Blood of the Fold because I was like, you know what? I think I'll give Blood of the Fold 1 or 2 more books. So I had book 4, Temple of the Winds, which I intend to read eventually this year. And then I was like, you know what? This is the start of the next series. I'll get this and eventually read it, and I'll make the determination after I read it whether I want to read more. But I got this one, and I think it'll be a really fun read. Terry Goodkind's kind of hit and miss with me so far. In hit and miss, not that individual books are hit and miss, but like in a single novel, he'll put stuff that I love and stuff that I hate. And I'm like, why can't you just put the stuff I love? Because I'm really frustrated. Anyway, speaking of authors who are hit and miss and put stuff I love and stuff I hate, George Martin wrote the A Song of Ice and Fire series, and I already have on my shelves over here a big collection of all 5 books, plus some of the other companion books, all in the same editions, and I really like them. And they actually look quite good despite being minimalist, because I don't like minimalist. I like big paintings on my books. But if you're gonna be minimalist, put a little throne, put a little sword, put a little crown or something. I think the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books, do it properly. However, as I said, I love me some full paintings. And so I got through the first 3 books in full paintings. I don't believe that Feast for Crows or Dance of Dragons actually has these types of covers, so I believe these are the only books that have these potential covers. But I got the cover of A Game of Thrones with the painting, beautiful painting. I wish they had expanded the painting, kept the lettering. The lettering's fine, but expanded the painting more, so the painting was the whole page. They could have made that better, but it's still a great painting of Winterfell and someone riding away, who I believe is either supposed to be Ned Stark or Jon Snow, but might be totally wrong on that. Next, we have A Clash of Kings, which I love this cover. And the first time I saw this, it's a throne So it's Joffrey. And then I was like, no, wait a second. It's the Red Woman, Melisandre, and it's got the stag with the heart stag on fire. I was like, no, that's Stannis. And so the Kneeling Lord must probably be what's his name? The Onion Knight, Davos. It must be Davos. So I just think this is a great cover as well. Beautiful. And then this one, I think that this one is, the coloration is poor. I think that the person who was coloring A Storm of Swords was leaning a little too heavily on medieval and not enough on like a medieval imagery, and not enough on just fantasy, dark fantasy, because like the blue and red stand out way too much and make this look like a cheesy King Arthur book. And the blue and red on his doesn't really work, I don't think, for the series. Everything in Game of Thrones is dark and grimy and cringy, and I feel like if they had just darkened these a little bit, dark reds, dark blues, made them not bright reds, bright blues, it would have worked better. But still, a solid cover. Obviously, I think this cover is meant to evoke the burial, or the burial, the ceremony for the death of Catelyn's someone. Maybe that's a spoiler. The death of a character that all of the Starks have to go to that funeral. I think it would have been a incredibly ballsy move to put the actual Red Wedding on this, to put before the Red Wedding really gets red, to put that on there. That would have been bold. They didn't do that, but still, I love these covers. I think they're just great covers, and I found them for like $2 a piece, and they are in quite good condition. The spines are not cracked, which I think is just amazing. That almost never happens with books like this. And so I was like, for like $2 a piece, that's worth it. So I snatched them up at the used bookstore, and it was actually at the used bookstore that doesn't add too much to their collection much. So that was really exciting. So now to the final fantasy book I bought, and this one I bought both for a couple of reasons. But not for reasons normally you would think. So last year, I read what I thought was one of the worst books I've ever read. And that book, and I'm going to grab it real quick to show you, was Shadow Moon by George Lucas and Chris Claremont. And this is if you know the story, it is a kind of sequel to Willow, but they couldn't use everything in Willow properly, so they basically changed a lot of the names, changed the pacing, changed the character design and stuff, and just really make it basically like an original fantasy novel that happens to have ties to Willow, rather than being a true sequel to Willow. Anyway, that's this novel. I hated it. Like, I don't give out hate much on, 90+% of my book reviews are really positive. And even then I try to minimize the negative book reviews. But this book I hated. I hated it with a passion. So you might be thinking, why am I talking about this right now? Well, I did a lot of research on this book and the series, the trilogy it's part of, when I read the book and was doing my video review. So as a part of my research, I realized that copies of this book are actually really rare. It's actually, because it bombed, they didn't actually print as many for the sequels, and because it was so poorly reviewed, people aren't really buying the sequels, so it's like hard to find them. And so even when you look on ABE Books, the sequels are going for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars sometimes. And some of them were only going, I think I found some copies for under $100, but still, it was ridiculous how much they were going for. So fast forward to this month, I'm at the bookstore, and it was just happenstance. I was not looking for it. I just happened to see Shadow Dawn by Chris Claremont and George Lucas. For this one, I think they wisely realized we don't want to oversell it, so they said by Chris Claremont and story by George Lucas. Because when you look at this one, and you look and you see it says Shadow Moon, George Lucas and Chris Claremont, you see it and you think George Lucas actually had a say in this. Like, he was actually penning the novel with Chris Claremont, and they're switching stories back and forth, and George is writing a chapter and Chris is writing a chapter, and then they'll edit each other's chapters. That's what I get when you see it on here. When you see it on here, you get a more accurate understanding. George Lucas had a vague idea for the series, and he pitched it, and he kind of gave an outline to Chris Claremont, and then Chris Claremont executed the outline in this book. So that's what that seems to be. So, yes, I absolutely detested this book. It was awful. It was horrendous. But I put so much time and research and effort into it that when I realized that was able to get this one for $1.50, $1.50, I was able to get this cover, and this book is going for much, much, much more than that online. I was like, I'm a collector, I'll get it. And also I was thinking, you know what? Maybe one day I'll read this and be like, hey, maybe this will be an amazing book, and I'll be like, man, I was so wrong about this series. I don't intend to do that anytime soon, and I don't want to just be a hate fest on Claremont and Lucas because I'm a big fan of Lucas. So I got this mostly because of the research and time I put into it, and also for like a completion's sake, and because as a collector, I'm like, oh, that's worth a lot of money. Now getting into the middle grade and young adult books that I got. For middle grade, I got the book Rescue by Jennifer A. Nielsen. Now, this is not a book I would ever pick up on my own, ordinarily, but at my school, I teach history, and the English teacher is teaching another book by this author called A Night Divided. And so she's going through that this semester. But at the same time, I, as the history teacher, am looking for books to talk about from the history perspective. She's reading it for the literary perspective. I'm reading it for the history perspective, and I bought this book as kind of research, looking in kind of historical fiction books that I could get for my 5th and 6th graders. And so I intended to just read this just as a looking into this genre. Probably won't use it, but just looking into the genre. So that's one that I could potentially use. The next 2 books I bought, I could never use it at my school, just because this is not the right tone. And that is the book Small Spaces and the book Dead Voices, both by Catherine Arden. Now, Catherine Arden is an author who wrote the Winter Night trilogy. Catherine Arden is... I thought that the first book was one of those literary masterpieces that I was like, this is like so well told, but it's boring to me. But I read the sequel because I just wanted to see if I liked it. And I respected the sequel. I thought that The Girl in the Tower was so well done, so impressive. The way it captured Russian history and lore and mythology and all that stuff, I was like, this is really impressive. And so then I read the third book, Winter of the Witch, which I hated. Like, I hated that book. But I still think Catherine Arden could wow me. And apparently she did 4 of these books for this publisher, for Penguin. And they're middle grade, and they're really quick, 200-plus page books. And I thought, you know what? I think I'd have fun with it. They're kind of horror middle grade, which I've surprisingly gotten into because of Delilah Dawson. But I was like, you know what? I'll give them a try. And if I like them, I'll look up similar authors or other books. So those are some books I got. And the final book I got was a book I actually got in January and forgot that I had gotten it. So I'm kind of pulling it over to February, and that's A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Read last year the whole Hunger Games trilogy, enjoyed the process, didn't love the third book as much, but enjoyed the process of reading the trilogy. And of course, loved the movies. And I was wanting to buy this book. They actually had a 50% off sale at the beginning of January at Barnes & Noble, and so I quickly went in and got this for 50% off, and forgot it in my car for over a month. And I know they're making a movie of it, and it's coming out later this year, and I was like, well, what better way to prepare for the movie than to buy the book and read the book in preparation? I've heard this is, it's some fans loved it and some fans didn't, but I've heard mixed things about it, but I'm interested in it, and I'm interested to see how the movie deviates. It's much longer than the first 3 books, which I actually think will work in its favor to tell a real complete story, since this is kind of like a prequel standalone. So if you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments section so that we can talk about them, and you can tell me whether I should be excited to read them or nervous. Let me know all those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.